Welcome back everybody, my name's Tucker, this is Sporting Logically, and today I'm going to unveil the rest of my 2018 NBA mock draft. Now when I did part 1 a little while ago, I got a lot of feedback that it kind of threw some people off that I revealed the picks in reverse order. So today I'm just going to start with the first overall pick and go through the entire mock draft. Now keep in mind that these are not predictions for who I think will be selected, these are who I would pick if I was the team on the clock. With that in mind, let's go ahead and get started. Beginning as was requested with the first overall pick, the Phoenix Suns select Luka Dončić. Now if you've watched any of my live streams either on Twitch or on YouTube, you'll know that I am definitely Team Luka, so I won't spend a ton of time on this one. Basically, everything Dončić has accomplished at such a young age makes him one of the safest picks at the top of the draft in my eyes, while also having a ton of potential and room to grow in his adjustment to the NBA game. There's also the obvious fact that the Suns' new head coach is Dončić's former coach with his national team, and when combined with Devin Booker, they would form one of the most promising young backcourts in the league. And that's more than enough for me to select him with the first overall pick. Moving on to the second overall pick, this is where things start to get a little bit interesting. Now I want to preface this selection by saying that there have been some reports in the past few weeks about this prospect moving up the draft lottery. But I decided my personal order weeks ago, so those reports did not affect this selection. Having said that, with the second overall pick in the 2018 NBA draft, the Sacramento Kings select Jaren Jr. out of Michigan State. Alright, this one is probably a fairly big surprise to most, but outside of Luka Dončić, Jaren Jackson is my favorite player in this draft. And seeing as how the Kings have been searching for a quality four-man for what seems like forever, this is a great match. I don't often throw out player comparisons and these kinds of things, but I'll make an exception in this case. In my eyes, Jaren Jackson is a 2018 version of Chris Bosh in his time with the Miami Heat. He's the most complete big man in this draft class and has the mobility and fluidity to be an impact player on both ends of the floor. At 6'11" with a 7'4" wingspan, Jackson shot nearly 40% from 3 on over 2.5 attempts per game in his one season in college, while also showing great rim protection ability with a 3 blocks per game average, all in just under 22 minutes per game. Jackson has the quickness to play the 4, the size to play the 5, and the shooting ability to stretch the floor at either of those positions. And he's the only big man in this draft you can confidently say all of those things about. Now having said that, I don't expect him to actually go this high in the real draft, but whoever does pick him is going to end up with the second best player in this draft class. Next on the clock is the Atlanta Hawks, and with the third overall pick, they select DeAndre Ayton out of Arizona. Alright, with the way this has played out so far, this was probably a pretty obvious pick. And even though I'm not as high on Ayton as many people are, he's too talented and has too much upside to slide down the order any further than this. There's no questioning Ayton's offensive prowess, as he averaged 20 and 10 as a freshman on his way to being named the Pac-12 Player of the Year. He even showcased the potential to stretch the floor at the NBA level as well, and although his shooting numbers don't have the same kind of volume as Jaren Jackson, they're still promising. Defensively, despite his high blocks per game average, I have question marks on that side of the ball, specifically with his ability to guard the pick and roll at the NBA level, and that will be one of his main responsibilities as a pro. Not only that, but the team also has a promising young big from last year's draft class returning as well in John Collins. But ultimately, the offensive prowess and potential of Ayton will be too much for them to pass up at the third spot. Moving on with the fourth overall pick, the Memphis Grizzlies select Wendell Carter Jr. out of Duke. At this point, I'm sure it's becoming clear that my evaluation of the top big men in this draft is pretty different than a lot of other people. The team needs for Memphis are pretty irrelevant here, as they have an older core of players that isn't going to be challenging for championships anytime soon, so they might as well pick the best player on the board regardless of position. And in this case, that player is the quote-unquote other big man out of Duke. He isn't an elite athlete, but in my mind, that's just about the only huge weakness in his game. He can score inside, he can protect the rim, brings great energy to the game, and even showed a little bit of an ability to stretch the floor from the three-point line. And although he isn't as widely praised as the other bigs in this draft, he's ultimately the best player on the board at this point. Next up with the fifth overall pick, the Dallas Mavericks select Marvin Bagley out of Duke. And now we have the big man that, in my opinion, isn't as well-rounded as his college counterpart as a prospect, might just be the best fit for the Dallas Mavericks out of any player in this draft. Ever since the team let go of Tyson Chandler after winning the 2011 NBA championship, they've been looking for an athletic, rim-running, and rolling big man to take his place. Rick Carlisle doesn't ask much out of his bigs other than to protect the rim defensively and attract attention inside offensively, and Bagley can excel in both of those areas at the professional level. Although concerns about his ball screen defense and lateral quickness caused him to slide down the board a bit for me, he has all the skills to be an ideal 5-man in Dallas, and along with the growth of second-year player Dennis Smith and the steady scoring presence of Harrison Barnes on the wing, the Mavericks will have set themselves up fairly well moving forward in terms of young talent. Moving along with the 6th overall pick, the Orlando Magic select Michael Porter Jr. out of Missouri. I'll be honest, it's pretty tough to try and figure out the Orlando Magic at this point. They seemingly have both needs and young players at every single position on the roster, pointing to some of the struggles they've had on draft day in the last few years. But nonetheless, selecting a player with as much upside as Porter Jr. would be a good move here in my eyes. Mario Hezonja and Aaron Gordon are both free agents this summer, while the team also selected Jonathan Isaac in last year's draft. But selecting another wing here would provide them insurance should one of those first two I mentioned leave in free agency, or should any of them not realize their potential at the professional level. A high-risk, high-reward pick if there ever was one in this draft, Porter Jr. barely played in his only season at Missouri, but he's a well-known 3-level scorer with room to grow as both a defender and a playmaker, which is a rare combination to find outside the top 5 of any draft. This pick could either be a stroke of genius or a huge blunder on the part of the Magic front office, depending on how Porter Jr. recovers from his injuries. But these are the kinds of big swings the franchise needs to take if they want to sniff the Eastern Conference playoffs sometime in the next few years. Next up is the Chicago Bulls, and with the 7th overall pick in the draft, they select Mo Bamba out of Texas. Potentially the most polarizing player in this draft class, I'm certainly not on the Mo Bamba hype train nearly as much as a lot of other people. Sure, I see the potential of a player with his incredible size and length being able to protect the rim defensively and stretch the floor offensively, but major question marks about his strength, quickness, and offensive skill cause him to be further down my personal big board than most others. Having said that, pairing him with Lauri Markkanen in the front court would be an intriguing combination in Chicago that, given the time to develop, could turn into a great foundation for the team to build on moving forward. If he does manage to be a consistent jump shooter at the NBA level and shore up some of the other parts of his game defensively, this could be a steal in the mid-lottery for the Bulls. Moving on to the 8th overall pick, the Cleveland Cavaliers select Mikal Bridges out of Villanova. Now this is obviously probably one of the more difficult picks to select because everything depends on whether or not LeBron James stays or goes in Cleveland. But regardless of his decision, the team has needs up and down the roster. With that in mind, I decided to just go with the best player left on the board in Bridges, the best 3-and-D wing in this class that, although he doesn't have the same kind of offensive upside as Porter Jr., is a much better all-around player right now and showed great improvement in his time in college, pointing to a guy that will continue to develop his game as a pro. Even if he never turns into an all-star caliber scorer at the NBA level, Bridges' shooting prowess and defensive ability should immediately translate to a Cavs team that's either trying to make the finals once again or is looking to build towards the future. Now on to the last pick that I haven't covered yet, and with the 9th overall pick, the New York Knicks select Trae Young out of Oklahoma. I won't lie, I've probably had the toughest time trying to figure out Trae Young as a prospect than any other player I can really remember coming into the draft in a long time. I've watched Oklahoma games and seen questionable shot selection and decision making that made me think the huge numbers he put up in college were completely empty. But then maybe 3 or 4 times a game, he would make a play that I didn't see anyone else in college make throughout the year. It might have been a deep 3 off the dribble or a pinpoint cross-court pass in transition, but a few times a game, Young would make me think that if he would just clean up the other parts of his game, he would become a great NBA player. Unfortunately for him, with so many other good players in this class, his lack of size caused him to fall down the lottery, although I doubt the Knicks would be complaining much in this scenario. They're in need of a scoring punch in the backcourt and already have another talented guard to try and hide some of Young's defensive weaknesses. All in all, this is a great match for both the team and the player, and a pairing that I'm sure both would be very excited about. If new Knicks head coach David Fizdale can manage to rein in Young just a bit and bring out the best in him, the team could have a future superstar on their hands for years to come. And that is the end of my 2018 NBA mock draft. Now, if you're confused about why I stopped at 9, that's because I've already covered the rest of the lottery in this video here, so be sure to check that out if you missed it. Now, I'll also be doing a live stream the night before the lottery this Wednesday at 6 p.m. Eastern, so if you have any other questions about the draft, I'd love to see you there. Thanks again, and I'll see you all next time.